Hi, Tracy here, also known as Mercy Tiara, with another episode of Find Your Mojo. Each episode will give you a prompt or a challenge to get your creative juices flowing and get you scrapping and documenting your memories. This time the prompt is to start with product, and I'm going to be starting with this beautiful Autumn Splendour scrapbooking kit from SCT Delivered. And I'm actually starting with this beautiful fall title piece. It's an acrylic piece that's exclusive to the kit, and I really love how light and airy it looks, and just how beautiful that frosted acrylic looks in such a beautiful light color. So I'm starting with the fall acrylic piece as my main starting off point that's going to inspire the whole rest of the page. And I also really want to use that stamp set that is included with the kit because it's also really beautiful and I want to use it. So I picked out some papers here, some pattern papers from the kit that coordinate quite well with the photo that I have in mind. I haven't shown the photo yet, but I do have it printed up, and it's a fall photo of my backyard. It's actually taken from last year because the leaves haven't turned here yet. But pretty soon, my backyard is going to look just like the one in the photo here, and I'm going to be documenting a story about a key part of our backyard for the past 8 or 9 years. So I just have to figure out which will be my background paper, and at first I'm really leaning towards using that piece of craft cardstock that came in the kit. I love that color for a background, and so I'm leaning towards that. I also really like that plaid piece of cardstock from Basil that came in the kit as well, but I'm ultimately going to go with this piece of pattern paper from Pink Paisley. It is from Auburn Lane, and I just really love the color that this brings to the page. And so I'm going to use that. And here's my, I guess, kind of like my inspiration board here would be the photo, the stamps, and the title. And I want some of the stamps to be above the word fall and some of the stamps to be under the word fall. And because my title is hopefully going to be stamped right on my background paper, I pulled out my Misti tool. This is the scrapbooking Misti tool. So it is 12 by 12. It's bigger than that. It's big enough to fit a 12 by 12 piece of paper inside, as you can see. And so I am just going to compose my title here. And after you figure out where your stamps will go, you just close the door and it picks up the stamps. And the door of this tool acts as your stamping block, and that allows you to position your stamps exactly as you want them to be on your background paper, and then pick them up and stamp them. And then if you happen to miss stamp, you can just re-ink the stamps and stamp it right back down in the same spot, as long as you don't let your paper move. You can get some really strong magnets to go with this to keep your paper in place. I'm not using them today, but as long as you scoot your paper down in the bottom corner, which you will see me do right before I start, then this, see right there, I just scooched it down in the bottom left-hand corner, then this tool will work. And I've decided to just use these stamps for the word down and not for, I'm actually not going to put all fall in these stamps. So here's the title that I have figured out, and now I just slowed this down so that you can see how this tool works. You close the tool onto your stamps and it picks up your stamp, and now it will stamp in exactly that spot. I am actually going to start by stamping onto a piece of grid paper just to make sure that my letters look the way I want them to look. It's sometimes hard to tell, and so I just inked onto the stamps, and see how I'm just checking it, and they're not quite straight. They're very close to straight, and they are spread out quite a bit. And if you don't like them spread out like that, you could stamp each individual letter to make them get closer together. Basically, because the part of the stamp that clings to your block or to your tool, to your Misti tool, is wider than the stamp itself, sometimes when you're using alphabet stamps, they end up being a little bit more spaced together. But what if you don't have a Misti positioner? I just wanted to demonstrate that you could use the Misti. It would be a perfect time to pull out your scrapbooking Misti if you were going to use it. But I really wanted to show you that you don't need any fancy tools to get this look. So I'm actually going to use a regular old stamping block here. So this is just a clear acrylic block. It's a little bit messy here, but I'm just using it to pick up those letters. And I'm just going to test it on this smaller piece of grid paper. And you'll see that it didn't stamp properly, but it's just a test. So I'm just checking to see whether the letters are lined up properly by stamping it on the grid paper. And then I'm just checking the look because I find that the grid is a little bit distracting. So I wanted to stamp it actually on plain paper so that I could see how it looks with the word fall without those distracting grid lines. And so I wasn't 100% pleased with the alignment. And excuse my head here, but I have to get myself right over top of those letters to position them right along one of the lines of the grid. And that really helped me be able to get them lined up. As you can see, they're absolutely perfect. And so when I stamp it without the grid, you can see that that actually looks quite nice. I quite like it. And the only thing that I'm thinking here is that I kind of feel like I don't want it in black. I'm thinking, what else could I stamp this in? And I just recently got some desert sand memento ink, so I was thinking about maybe giving that a try. I haven't used it yet. And then I decided that I would pull out my embossing powders, and I knew I had a fine detail gold embossing powder in my stash, so I just went and found it. Now, my hesitation around embossing is that my embossing pad is really messy, and sometimes it leaves these little stray pieces of lint in my stamped image that then of course the embossing powder sticks to, and then it ends up with a less than perfect image. But this time it actually stamped okay. I'm pretty pleased with it. See that bigger space between the O and the W? If that was really bothering you, you could avoid that by stamping each of the letters individually instead of stamping them out as one. It really doesn't bother me. Now, my gold embossing powder was actually kind of messy too. I wasn't very careful the last time I used it, and I ended up with some dust and debris in the embossing powder. So I decided to actually discard the first bunch of embossing powder that's in my little cup, the little tub of embossing powder. So I used my Embossing Buddy tool, which is just a little powder tool that makes sure it eliminates the static on the page and makes sure that my embossing powder is only going to stick to the embossing glue and not the whole rest of my page. So then I'm just dumping the cleaner embossing powder over the stamped image. And Versamark is just it's basically a clear glue that you stamp on your project, and then the embossing powder sticks to it. So I just use a coffee filter to grab the stray embossing powder, and now I'm just using my heat gun to heat this up, and it melts the embossing powder. Embossing powder is just tiny little pieces of plastic, and when you melt it, it all kind of melds together into a really beautiful fine line where you've stamped. So I'm putting my stamps away now, and I'm really, really pleased with the way that this turns out. Whenever you do heat embossing, you always run the risk that your paper will buckle, and this paper is buckled a little bit. You can't see it because I'm so zoomed in, but the paper is a little bit warped under where the embossing is. So I'm going to adhere this paper to a background piece. As I said before, I really love this background paper by Basil. I just adore this very subtle plaid print, and I like it so much that I want to use it as a mat around the outside edge of this page, but I'm going to salvage the inside by just cutting a chunk out of the inside so that I can use that chunk for some other projects that I might use with this kit. Now here I am using my distress tool. It's a Tim Holtz distress tool, and I'm just taking it along the edges of my paper. And you might be asking, why are you distressing the edges of a paper that you plan to trim down in order to mat it with that beautiful plaid paper? And that's a really good question. And my answer is, I forgot. I just forgot. So I'm going to trim this paper down. And because I really like the positioning of the word down on this paper relative to the overall size of the paper, I'm going to take off 1/4 of an inch from each side. Sometimes when I'm doing this, I will take a half an inch off of two adjacent sides. But as I said, I want to maintain the positioning of that word down. So just taking a little bit off of each side helps me to do that. This is what this tool looks like up close. If you haven't seen it before, it has multiple little blades inside, and it's very safe to use. You can't get your fingers inside of any of those little ridges, and so it's very safe to use, and it just allows you to run the blade across the edge of the paper. And I really love the white distressed fibers that show when you do this to the edges of paper, and it looks especially good on a fall layout. I'm just going to brush that up, and I just keep this brush handy, and it's just from the dollar store. It's nothing fancy or anything, but it helps me to brush those little pieces of debris onto my lap and on the floor below me. It would be nice if I would sweep it into a dustpan, but I almost always miss the dustpan and it ends up in my lap instead. But that's okay because it's not on my work surface and it's not interfering with the video. So I have this beautiful sewing machine. It's a tiny little sewing machine. It's half size, and it's by Janome, and it's called New Home. And I'll show you a screen cap of the logo of it. And I love this little sewing machine, and I have it pre-threaded with black thread, and I want to use that golden denim colored thread, of which I only have a small amount. There's how it looks on the side. And I'm actually deciding to not use this sewing machine because it's pre-threaded with black thread and a black bobbin, but I want to have a white bobbin. So I happen to have two of these. This is a Kenmore. It's exactly the same machine as the one that predated the New Home. So before Janome made the New Home sewing machine, they made one called the Sew Mini, and this is the Kenmore version of that. And I've had this for many, many years, and I thought it was broken. I replaced it with the New Home by Janome, and then I found out that this one works. So I just had the settings wrong, so I decided to keep it. And this way I have one sewing machine that's all set up with a light colored bobbin, and one machine that's all set up with a dark bobbin. And I thought I would include a little bit of footage here of how you sew on a paper just from a different angle so that you can see how I do it, especially as I approach this corner. So as I approach the corner, I start using the crank on the side, like the wheel that you turn, and I turn it by hand until I get to the very edge. I leave my needle in the paper, lift up the foot, turn the paper around, put the foot down, and continue to sew. And that's how I use it. I thought it might be helpful because I know not everybody sews on their pages, and it seems like it might be an intimidating thing to do, but it's actually very, very simple. If you've sewn on fabric, you can totally sew on paper. Just be careful not to sew over glue if possible, or just be mindful about sewing over glue. Look at how beautiful that looks, because it can gunk up the inside of your machine. I really love that thread. Is actually the golden colored brown thread that you get for sewing hems in jeans, and I adore it on fall pages. And it's quite a bit of a thicker thread than the regular thread that you typically use, and so it just fills the holes perfectly along the edge when you sew. I really love the look of it. It looks so luxurious. So I'm using more of that paper that I cut out of the middle to mat my photo. And I'm going to put the photo over to the left as I showed at the beginning of my title. And you may recall my title was actually going to be We All Fall Down. And so I do plan to still make that my title. It's not just going to be Fall Down, but I'm thinking about using these labels that are from American Crafts. They're under the label of Typecast, which is the name of their typewriter. So I'm going to use those as well. And I'm just in my stash right now looking through my small letter stickers, looking for a couple of different options. And this is what I usually do. I go to my stash, I pull out several options, and you'll see them appear right there. And so these are all of the options that I have. They're fairly old letter stickers, and I decided to go with these Webster's Pages tiny, tiny little letter stickers. I love that they're on a wood grain background, and they're just so tiny, and I like that it's white letters on a really pale wooden background. I think they work really well with this title. And I didn't want the words we and all to take away from the words fall down. And so that's why I wanted them to be quite a bit tinier. I'm going to overlap the E under the W because of the way the two letters are cut. There's more extra space beside the E than there is beside the W. And I just want to have those positioned so that they're beside the A sender of the F. So it looks like this title is all nestled in and cozy. And I really like how that combination of different fonts looks. And generally speaking, when I combine fonts, I like only one of them to be fancy or scripty or scrolly. So here I have the word fall is very, what I would consider fancy and organic looking. So the other letters that I choose to use both above and below it will be a blockier letter. And they don't have to be the same as each other. As you see, they look pretty nice when they're, even if they're two different fonts. Now I want to get a little bit more pattern paper on this page. Pattern paper gives you a great opportunity to combine some more colors. And right now it's very pink, and I want to make sure that I bring in more of the browns and burgundies and orangey colors. And so this beautiful paper, it's from Simple Stories from the Forever Fall collection. It came in the kit. It just adds more of those colors that I'm looking for, and I'm sorry that I haven't zoomed out. I will in just a second, so bear with me here. But I'm just pulling out some more embellishments, particularly those two artificial leaves that come in the kit. One is larger than the other, and I'm just thinking about positioning them so that they're peeking out from behind the photo. And what that's going to do is add even more of those warm brown colors, browns and oranges. And I also have the Forever Fall die cuts from Simple Stories. And I'm pulling out any of the die cut pieces that really appeal to me. And I have a couple of them that I really love, especially those pod-like floral things that I have. There's one over beside the word down, and then there's another one in a vase here. And I really want to get at least one of these on my paper, on my page today. And then I also picked out all of the circle die cuts because I thought I might use some of those. I also grabbed that pink tag that has or it's a tab, I mean, with a heart on it. And a couple of other fall leaves and just little things. I'm shying away from most phrases, but I do have this fall memories here that I'll probably get on the page. And so these are all my contenders, but they might not make it onto the page. So I put those up in the top right-hand corner of my workspace, and I really like how this is looking. What do you guys think? I'm thinking I need to consider how I'm going to put the word fall on my page. And I have this little piece of foam that I use when I'm piercing paper. And so I'm going to slip that behind my layout, and then I'm using my Stampin' Up! Paper piercer. And I'm just going to pierce 4 holes, 2 on either side of the 2 lengthy parts of the L's and also on the lengthy part of the F. And I'm going to put 3 cross stitches to hold this word fall down. And at first I'm using the same thread that I used around the outside edge of my page. And I was pretty sure that that would be too thin, but I thought maybe I could do multiple layers. So I'm going to start with 1. And yeah, that's definitely too thin, especially given the size of the holes. The thread is not filling up the hole enough, and it's also just not giving me that nice thick cross-stitched look that I'm looking for. So I'm actually going to abandon this idea. I think I'm going to go a little bit further before I abandon it, but I'm going to instead, see, I grabbed some other thread, and that's a little bit too orangey for me. And I also grabbed some some embroidery thread. And I don't have a ton of embroidery thread, but I do have a small selection, and this color happens to be not identical, but very, very similar to the color of thread that is around the outside edge of my page. It's not an exact match, but it is pretty close. So I am going to cross stitch along these lines, and I just have to tuck my die cut back in place, not my die cut, my acrylic piece back in place so that I can make a little X across this and see how much more substantial that cross stitch looks now. It fills the holes, and it also grabs your attention, and it becomes a little bit more detail on this already beautiful acrylic piece. And it also keeps me from having to contend with figuring out what kind of glue I'm going to use and how I'm going to make sure that it doesn't show. Generally speaking, when I glue down, when I use liquid glue or any kind of glue for this kind of an embellishment that's see-through, I have to coat the whole back of it in glue to make sure that there's no places that the glue shows. So this is a really nice alternative to having to make sure that I get a nice consistent coat of glue underneath of this piece. And I really like how it looks. It's very fallish. I don't know why I consider cross stitch a fall item, but it feels like fall to me. Of course, you can cross stitch any time of year, and I wish I could cross stitch, but I can't. I shouldn't say I can't. I guess I could, but it's not something that I have a lot of patience and attention for. So I can do 3 cross stitches. That's what I can do. So I'm going to use my tiny attacher to stick this little tab right between my photo and the mat. I'm going to do the same with this, but I haven't committed to it yet. The fall memory's up at the top. So there will actually be 2 tabs sticking out of this, one in the bottom corner and one in the top opposite corner. And as you can see, I'm just attaching my embellishments right to the back side of my photo and the mat. And that just allows me to layer these exactly the way I want them to be layered. And I just want a tiny, tiny bit of that leaf sticking out because I think it can be pretty overpowering otherwise. It provides a little bit of separation between these die cuts that have the white halo around them and then that background pattern paper that has the triangles on it, which also has a lot of, it's not exactly white, but it's an off-white. And so the leaves just kind of bring a little bit more interest between those 2 layers and helps to accentuate the difference between the 2 layers as well. So that white, die cut, the 2 die cuts that have the white halo around them isn't directly on that also whitish mat that has the triangles on it, if that makes sense. Providing some separation between 2 elements that are so similar like that really helps your elements pop out when you're combining embellishments. So now here I have these labels that are designed to go through the typecast, so let's give this a try. I've used my typecast quite a lot. This is the We Are Memory Keepers typewriter, and I have never used it for typing on stickers before. So let's give this a try. I'm using the largest sticker because I have quite a bit I want to put on this one. And under date, I'm putting since 2009. And then place, I put backyard. And then I'm starting to type. It says, the trampoline has been a part of our family for so long. We will miss jumping and also miss seeing it. So adding typewriter font to your pages is a really great way to add some personality to a page. I have a couple of typewriters. This one is the prettiest that I have. So this is the one that I've kept in my scrap room after a recent move, and I left my vintage one downstairs. But I really love adding typewriting to my page, and these stickers work really, really well because they're not shiny like some stickers are, so the typewriting really sticks to it well. I slowed down my footage and changed my angle here so that you can see how the typewriter works. And I don't think too carefully about lining it up and my page margins and whatnot. Like you see, I go over here and then I'm actually going to roll it back a little bit so that this last line of text is a little bit closer to the second last line. So watch. So you just pull it back just one click. And that's just going to bring it up off of that bottom line a little bit. And I like to have my typewriting have a real mismatched kind of a look and really casual. And here's how when you make a mistake, I use my back key and then I put the right key on and then back key and the right key and then back key. And so in this case, I did backspace E, backspace E, backspace E to make the E be quite a bit darker than I think there was a J there before. And eventually the J just gets lost in the really dark E. And I do that every time I make a mistake. I made a mistake above too with the since 2009. I think my 2 was a little bit too low first. And I did that same approach to fixing a mistake with a typewriter. So I also typed 2 trampled to keep it. No, 2 trampled to keep, and then a sad face emoji with the typewriter, like the colon and the close brackets or open brackets. And I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to position these things. So I decided to not put them by the title. I felt like my title was really beautiful and I didn't want to cover, like I didn't want to take away from it by putting such big blocky things around it. So I decided to move the larger bit of journaling up to the top left-hand corner and then the smaller bit of journaling right below the photo. I'm using some foam tape here to stick my photo up off the page a little bit, and that will help allow for all of those layers of embellishments in the 2 corners so that the photo will lie flat overall. And now I'm just picking out some embellishments to put on this page, some additional embellishments besides the layers that are behind the photo. And so as I place these die cuts, these are the ones that I've already chosen as shortlisted for potentially landing on this layout. I'm arranging them with kind of this visual triangle in mind. So I have one part of the triangle is here by the title, one is over here over to the bottom left of the photo, and one is up in the top left of the page itself. And so now that I placed 1 leaf in each of those 3 spots, I'm going to cluster 3 little enamel pieces here, or enamel dots. What are they calling these by Bo Bunny? They are called Mocha Jewels, and what a great name, because they definitely look like mocha jewels. So I'm just not thinking it too much. It's important to not overthink your placement with these sorts of embellishments. They kind of land where they land, and I'm trying not to be too fussy about it, but I'm putting 3 different mocha jewels in each of the 3 spots, and I'm placing them fairly close to those leaves. And I chose the light colored leaves. There were 3 of them in the pack, and I chose to put all 3 of them on the page because it adds a neutral element. There is plenty of color on this page, so I wanted the leaf to not gather too much of your attention. So I did layer that little vase of pod-like things over there in the top corner, and I layered it with one of the circles with that really pretty plaid print on it. Now I'm just going to position my photo, and again that foam tape helps it to lay flat with all of those embellishments in each of the corners. And I needed a touch of color up here, and so I decided to put this burgundy heart. Thought about a different one, but no, I'm going to go with the burgundy heart up there. And that just brings some of that rich color from the main 2 clusters back up into the top cluster. That's sort of like a secondary cluster. It's really just housing my journaling. And I was going to use my roller date stamp. I want to put 2017 on this page because that's the year that the photo was taken. We will be taking down our trampoline this fall, probably before the fall leaves turn. So this will be the last time that our yard looks like this. So I just wanted to, put the date on it somewhere. So I grabbed my Sharpie pen and I'll just put it below this little label here with the fishtails on it, like a banner type of label from the Typecast stickers. And I'm really thinking this through, aren't I? I probably overthought that a little bit, but just stick the date right there. And I like how this one looks. Here it is up close. And I just had a moment here of thinking I want to add a little bit more color up in the top corner there. And then I'll add another one of these little mocha jewels on the second heart that shows up on the page, just so that both of the hearts are kind of treated the same. I thought about maybe bundling a little bit of thread. That was my initial idea, was that I would have little bundles of thread kind of hanging out of the embellishment clusters, but I decided against it. It just looked a little bit too messy. I like the neat and tidy look that this page has, so I didn't want to take it in a different direction. If I had used the little bundles of thread, I might have also splattered some ink around, but I kind of like it the way it is, so I'm not going to add those 2 things. I really like that little circle there that says fall with the arrows on it. I really like that a lot. And we have a fairly strong visual triangle here that guides your eyes around the page and incorporates the photo, the title, and the journaling with a little bit of fall leaves and sprinkles falling out. So I just wanted to show another option for what you could do when you emboss an outline font. This is actually a different stamp set that I used to stamp out the word home, very much the same as I did with the word down here, using the stamps that came in the kit. This time I embossed in black instead of in gold, and then I took a very light colored Copic marker. I think it was BG11. It was a while ago, so I can't quite remember, but I just colored inside of the embossing, and it just gave a very subtle look. So that's another option. I didn't want to do that with this because I really liked the look of the pattern showing through, and I just really liked it plain outlined. But if you wanted to make this word stand out even more, coloring it in maybe in a darker shade of pink would be another option. So here's how this page looks from afar. I can't believe this page started with one acrylic word in a stamp set. I really love how it turned out. Thanks so much for watching. I hope that you found this process video helpful in terms of giving you some ideas about how to start off your process with the products that you have and then building your page around that. It's one more way to just jumpstart your creativity and get yourself scrapping and documenting some of those stories. Take care and have a really great scrappy week.